Estranged parents, I would like to talk to you today. And I'd also like to talk to all of the people who are online, regardless of whether or not you have a degree or you take clients or not, who are on platforms like this one, giving advice when people ask you questions based on the content that you're sharing. I'm seeing a lot of estranged parents who are struggling and really genuinely trying to figure out what they can do, what they need to do, what they did do, how to repair their relationships. And before I go into what I initially want to address here, which is the professionals and non-professionals out there who are saying things that I'm getting tagged in videos or getting content sent to me, and I see some stuff happening that can be really damaging to somebody who is seeking help or somebody who isn't seeking help for that matter. There's ways in which we need to deliver messages, and also being trauma informed, that we have to take responsibility for, in my opinion, if we're going to be on here engaging with people, particularly if we're going to do so individually. When somebody asks for advice through a comment, or maybe they didn't and you stitch their video because you saw it and it resonated with you, and you give advice to that person very specifically, that's not exactly the most responsible thing to do. I know that oftentimes our hearts are in the right place and we're trying to do the right thing, but here's the deal. A snippet that's 60 seconds long or even 10 minutes long, or a little comment with a question here back and forth, isn't going to give you enough of a picture to be able to give that person specific advice. It's better to keep it more broad, so that it can resonate in bits and pieces with different people. You can be as helpful as you possibly can without targeting that one specific person with whom you don't really have enough knowledge of their background, their family dynamics, their triggers, to be able to respond to them in a way that's going to be helpful. We need to be careful. And we need to understand that if you're going to give advice, it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility. So when we're talking about estrangements, I'm a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm very clear about that. Nothing on any of my documents say licensed therapist. I am certified. I'm certified in trauma, EMDR, complex PTSD, sexual abuse. I have to be careful how I say that, and a few other things. Things that are pertinent to the clients that I work with that I feel I needed to expand on, to have in my tool chest, to show up for them in the best way possible. So in my practice, all of my clients are adult survivors of narcissistic abuse. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like people who have been severely emotionally abused. And when I say severely as opposed to not severely, what I mean by that is narcissistic abuse is unique in the way that the emotional abuse rolls out. It's a type of abuse that's intentional, it's methodical, and it builds in layers and layers and layers and layers over a child's lifetime. So it isn't that ignorant parent losing their cool for a moment who goes, "You stupid, why did you do that?" kind of thing, which is abusive, which causes trauma, which is never okay. It is more nonverbal than it is verbal oftentimes, in terms of how it's directed at the child. There's messaging that they are not as good as everybody else, and in fact they are bad. There's messaging that they are damaged goods, that everybody knows how horrible they are. Their identity is destroyed through this type of abuse, with intention to build ultimate control for the narcissistic abuser, to have their claws into that child for a lifetime. And what they don't bank on is that children grow up and gain life experiences. And in some cases, those experiences give those children the contrast to realize that that is actually not what love looks like. Love isn't something that children should ever be working for. It should be unconditional and freely given by the parents. And so those are the clients that I work with. And in that, I have clients who, unfortunately, like myself, have also gone through physical abuse, domestic violence, and CSA and SA. And part of that is also due to the fact that children who come from backgrounds where you've gone through narcissistic abuse, you are pre-groomed for other predators. and you identify pain with love, and where somebody else might see a red flag, we don't, because those were our green flags. We speak a different language from other people who were not abused in this manner. And so my clients are those survivors. Most of them are no contact with their families. Some of them have some family members that they've retained relationships with, but most of them have none. Some of them came to me already estranged for different periods of time. Some of them came to me in the midst of disengaging, and some of them have disengaged throughout the therapy process. Important to note here, I never encourage or discourage no contact. That isn't my job. My job, in my view, is to help people develop the tools that they need to make their own life decisions. Because ultimately, I would like them not to need me, right? So in that client base that I also have adult survivors of narcissistic family systems who are going through estrangements with their own children. Child or children, depending on the number of kids in the family, some all, some one, some half, some low contacts, all different situations going on. And in saying that, I want to let you know it's not unusual to end up as an adult survivor of trauma being no contact for some period of time with your child, falling out. It's not the same thing as that permanent estrangement that happens because of intentional abuse. Because the intentional abuse that happens in narcissistic family systems never gets owned by the perpetrators or even the family systems. And because of that, there's no room for healing those relationships. The survivors who end up in estrangements with their own children do so because they passed down trauma, because they were dysfunctional. Our roadmap for parenting oftentimes placed us in a position where we decided we were going to do opposite of anything my mother would have done. And, no extreme is good, but here's the other part of that that's really not good. My experiences with my mother shaped how I react to the world around me and bring in some base feelings that I have. Just like any person, we have our experiences that shade how we receive information, how we respond to it, how we react to it, what our preferences are, all sorts of stuff like that. When you're parenting from those types of wounds, you're assuming that your children are going to have the same feelings attached to the same or similar experiences. So you will go out of your way maybe to bubble wrap them so that they don't have any real life kind of fall down, scrape their knees, and teach them how to, fix that. So it could be that we become over controlling as a result of that because we're trying to keep our children safe. That's one example. There's others, but this video isn't all about that. I just want to point out that there's a difference in terms of not intentional abuse. It is a passing down trauma because we are learning as we go, and unfortunately, more often than not, our children are our guinea pigs, and the first pancake gets the brunt of it all. As an adult survivor of a narcissistic family system, my mother is a sociopath and a narcissist. I have ended up at different periods of time where my children didn't speak to me. And guess what? Not one of my children came to me and said, hey, if you keep doing this, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. That's not how it rolled out. That's not how we fell out. That's not to say that I didn't understand why they didn't speak to me in some cases, and in other cases not, without having some dialogue and conversation. Ultimately, when I had the opportunity, when my children came back around, we had the hard conversations. We still have the conversations. They just look different now because there's a lot of trust that's been built up over time because my children have experienced with me that I will validate them. I will not make it about me. I do not make excuses. We talk through how something I did impacted them. I own it, I apologize, and I ask them what they need from me. That's how it rolls out. So when you have an estranged parent come on and say, I don't know what I did, I don't know what happened, or I do know, but I don't know if it was that reason they went no contact with me, please stop attacking them. Please stop saying to them, oh, you know what you did. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but we still shouldn't attack anybody. That doesn't make us any better than they are. Let's lead with kindness for starters. Now getting to the advice that I'm starting to see a bit of, I hate the word trend, because we also know that those estranged parents who we understand why they're estranged, they blame it on a trend. So this is not that. I'm seeing a trend of a certain type of advice and connection that's happening that is causing concern to me, because as a therapist, I am trauma informed. And as a therapist, I also realize that there are certain things we should and shouldn't say, even if you're not trauma informed. We have to be careful not to bring our experiences into it, in terms of assuming that the person who's sitting in front of you has the exact same experience, because they don't. And that's very black and white thinking. And that's actually a signal to yourself that if you're in that black and white thinking, you might not be in a place where you should be giving advice until you can kind of embrace that gray area, which is so important in terms of being able to connect to other people where they are rather than where you are, where we are, right? You have to meet people where they are, not where you assume they are. And when we're giving advice to somebody who's made a comment on our videos, or sometimes people stitch and duet and things like that, I don't tend to do that so much. I'm connecting more through the comments. It's important to recognize that we don't know their whole backstory. And just because we know the patterns and things like that doesn't mean that that's their specific backstory. They might have content that you can look at to get a little bit more flavor for who they are. I encourage you to do that, because there are estranged parents out there who are just a box of red flags. You know, those parents who are saying, my child was doing drugs and they were difficult, and really throwing their kids under the bus. They're estranged for probably the rest of their life because of that, because they are not in it for the protection and healing of their children and their relationships. They're in it for the attention and for somebody to tell them everything they did was okay. There's a difference there. There are ways that you can look at these accounts, filters that you can use to separate them out a little bit, but even that is not tried and true. So I go with the assumption that they are genuinely asking for help. And if they're not, and I'm giving advice to the wrong person, well, I'm online. Somebody who's the right person is going to see it. So please don't tell people things like, well, you know what you did, when they're coming online and being really vulnerable and going, I'm really trying to understand. And they're giving bits and pieces of, you know, there are some things that my child said along the way that maybe those are the things, but I'm not sure. Is anybody here? Has anybody repaired their relationships? What did that look like? Just because you repaired your relationship with your child doesn't mean that your situation is their situation. So saying things like, yep, they tried to tell you. Yep, they tried to tell you. Yep, yeah. My kids would disagree with that. I have 3 of them. They would disagree with that. They didn't try to tell me. They had enough. That's what happened, literally. Now, when I went no contact over 30 years ago, I did tell my mother. I told her if she kept doing the things she was doing with my children, I wasn't going to be connecting with her. I did tell her. And she did it anyway, over and over again. Sometimes we tell and we share, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we think we gave the information and that the parent should have known. People, nobody is a mind reader. If you're thinking of going no contact, let your parent know. Let them know. Say, listen, if you continue along these lines of behavior, I'm not going to be able to have a relationship with you anymore. And that's not what I want. They might still come back and go, oh, they didn't tell me. Well, then you know who you're dealing with. If they lie about it, you know who you're dealing with. And you know, wow, you're really making the right decision, because they're not going to take ownership. But to sit here and tell people, oh, you must have known, I don't think that that's a good thing. I see this huge division happening, and it's really not productive to helping people. We have the estranged parent group over here who are hardcore, and I'm not going to apologize to my kids and blah, blah, blah. And those estranged children shouldn't be commenting on my platform and things like that, because some of the estranged children who are hurting and angry are coming at those parents in an aggressive way. That's not going to build the community of learning that we need to be building here. If you feel that that estranged parent has triggered you to the point that you're going to go off on them, ask yourself why that is and what you're going to get out of it. Let's do things with the mindset of being helpful, or don't engage in that way. And then we have the group of estranged children over here, adult children, who are being attacked by these estranged parents in a similar fashion. Oh, you're just doing it because it's the trend. Oh, you just threw in the towel. And listen, I've had every comment you could possibly imagine. That's also not okay. My estranged parents out there, if you're doing that, you're bullying a trauma survivor with intention. Don't do it. Or maybe you're just triggered. Let me give you the benefit of the doubt. But typically when I see comments like that and I look at that person's page, there's a lot of toxic stuff going on. The other thing I want to ask people to stop doing is telling other people how they feel. Oh, I was there. This is what you think you feel. That's not how you're feeling. This is what I see. This is what I see you're feeling. I've seen videos like that, and I'm like, oh, like it hurts my heart. And even when it's directed at an estranged parent who I know why they're estranged, I might even have connections to their adult children. In some cases, I do. In a lot of cases, I do. It's not okay to tell people how they're feeling because you experienced it, and therefore that's the way they must be feeling. It's the same thing of, if you don't forgive, you don't heal. It's not okay to tell people how in such a concrete way, or why, or are, all of that. So let's come together and use our words differently. I can see that you're hurting, especially if somebody's going, I'm really hurting because of this. Well, validate people's feelings. It takes a second, and it really helps people to feel safe. And I want us to build safety for everyone. I can see that you're hurting. Back in the day when I went through this, before I, healed my relationship with my child, or, my child isn't talking to me, but we did have a conversation and now I'm recognizing certain things, whatever your experience is, be very firsthand in it. Back when I was going through that, I thought I felt this attached to that. But then I realized as I was processing through my feelings and my experience, that wasn't really at the core of what I was feeling. Maybe it would be a good idea for you to take a little bit of time to journal and process through your feelings, or whatever it is. And again, I'm talking mostly to people who are psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, licensed, social workers, licensed, not whatever, people who are in the field, particularly those of you that are taking clients. I just want to see everybody build more safety and be a little bit more careful with their words and their strong point of views. The world isn't black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray in there. And when we give advice to someone, remembering that we aren't personally connected to them, even though we are personally connected to the subject matter, isn't enough to give such pointed advice to. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. For all of my survivors out there, estranged, as a parent, as a child, healing from trauma, whatever it is you're doing, the number one piece of advice I can give you from personal experience is to work on building a relationship of love with yourself, and then keep moving forward. You'd be surprised how the pieces will fall into place. Have a great day, everyone. And if anybody has any questions, comments that they would like addressed, please leave them in the comments section. And I will see you soon.